Look, it's been an interesting survey. We had a fairly significant response, about 400 responses. Of those, about 285 over 200 employees. Some of the biggest responses we found, or some of the most interesting information we found, is that we found regarding HR systems, HRIS systems, nearly 60% of the respondents have been using their HR system for longer than 5 years. So there's a large portion of the market that has had systems in now for well over 5 years. So that's quite an interesting statistic. What we find is nearly 30, we asked this year about spending, organisation spending around HR technology. Nearly 35% of organisations are planning to spend more on their HR systems this year. And probably about 44% of respondents are planning to spend the same amount as they did last year. But there's quite a large portion of organisations who are spending more and more on their HR technology. A lot of the time, one of the questions we asked that was new this year was what time are you spending from a HR technology perspective? Where are you spending your time? And nearly 35% of HR technical resources are spending their time on system upgrades on existing software, and that's quite a substantial amount of time. Another 32% are spending time implementing new functionality in their systems. So there's a lot of work going on with existing systems, getting more out of those systems and trying to keep it upgraded to the latest version, which a lot of people in the HR tech community know consumes a lot of time with existing traditional software. In terms of technology strategy, we started to ask about how organisations, what departments are coming in to represent that HR technology strategy, and we found that over 20% of organisations use representatives from all groups. That includes finance, IT, and other areas. But there's over 50% of organisations where their HR technology strategy is just driven by HR only, meaning there's a lot of internalisation of when it comes to decide what other systems should be used within HR. We started to ask also about new technology. So one of the key findings we found is there's a lot of organisations that are starting to use social recruiting tools, and there's a significant amount of organisations who are now planning to use social recruiting to try and attract more candidates, keep that candidate pool active, and that's when you're looking at the HR technology scene, that's a really exciting, expanding area, that social recruiting segment. We asked about mobile technology, how many organisations want to use mobile devices and tablets around HR functions. Only 5% are using mobile technology, although we have 22% who are planning to use that technology this year. So that's a significant increase there. In terms of other point solutions, we see a lot of interest in spending around performance management, learning management, and recruitment systems for the 2012 survey. We're still crunching more numbers, but that's some of the key. Okay, so if you've decided you need to get out there, you need a new HR system, I think some of the considerations is your project structure for when you've gone out. We find it very important that you've got internally a good project team together for HR system selection. You've got a steering committee that's represented by senior levels of the business. There's a project charter established, and there's some terms and scope of reference. That's really important to do that planning up front before you go and commit to some serious dollars around technology. Part of that planning is also understanding what the business requirements are, and the key requirements from a HR perspective and from a business around the employee life cycle, so that any system is going to match back to those key requirements. Oftentimes this can get confused with operational requirements, and usually when you're replacing a system, there's a lot of noise and a lot of interference at the operational level about these are our problems, but it's really coming back at a bit of a higher level to make sure you understand those high level business requirements. The other thing you need to consider when you're selecting a HR system is you're not just picking the product, you're picking a vendor. And In the US, I like the terminology they use over there where the vendors, and this is a terminology from the vendors, they talk about partnering with organisations. And I think that's something in Australia we don't see that relationship between the vendor and the organisation as a partnership, and it is a partnership. And I think it's very important that when you're selecting a system, you look at who the vendor is, and you look at the strength of their leadership team, you look at the roadmap for their software, and you look at the platform their software is created against. In Australia, we have a lot of traditional HR vendors with aging technical platforms. I think if you're going to go to a new HR system, you need to be very careful to make sure you're not going to another aging platform and you're going to something that's more built for the modern cloud software as a service type industry we're now living with. Probably the last component you need to worry about when selecting a new system is ensuring when you're getting the demonstrations from the vendors, you're not just sitting through a demonstration, but you're also asking for prototyping and real life scenarios against their software. And this may involve 1 or 2 day workshops with the vendors to really demonstrate to you that their solutions can meet your requirements and that you're getting down into the actual seeing how their solution can handle your business processes and requirements on a day-to-day level. And this really allows you to break through this sort of demonstration smoke and mirrors that a 1 hour or 2 hour involved demonstration doesn't really show you. Okay, so why do HR systems fail? This is an interesting topic. I think, in my experience as a consultant in the HR area over nearly 20 years, oftentimes the software is not the problem. Most of the software I see in the enterprise space works relatively well. The biggest failure in projects is around people issues or process issues. And people management and the process. And a lot of the times the expectations for the projects aren't realistic or the scope has changed. And I think what that means is that the way to make sure your HR systems project won't fail is to do that proper planning up front. In the software world, they always talk about paper-based prototyping, designing on paper before you design on code. It's a lot cheaper. In the project world, I think the same is true, that the more you do up front, the more planning, the more project planning you do on paper, before you commit to a system, before you choose a system, you'll be right in front. And a lot of that is around making sure you understand the future requirements for your business and really what you want to get out of a system. That's often helped by making sure you have that dedicated project team, you have that project charter, and you have that input and that representation from senior management. Senior management need to worry about HR systems because it's about technology that manages their most important asset, which is their people. So they need to realise that this is an important decision for the whole organisation, and it's just not a HR responsibility. Probably the other thing I can think of is around customizations and modifications to the software. I see a lot of projects succeeding in implementation but failing in 1 or 2 years' time because the customer's left with a customized version of a software, there's no upgrade path left, and they're in an expensive contract for support and maintenance because any feature that's continued with the product they can't get because they're in a locked version of the product. If your business is really that different that you need to customize the software, I think you then need to look at choosing a solution that has that configuration over the customization aspect of it.